Charles Chaplin made The Gold Rush out of the most unlikely sources of inspiration for a comedy. The first idea came when he was viewing some stereoscopic pictures of the 1896 Klondike Gold Rush and was struck by the image of an endless line of prospectors snaking up the Chilkoot Pass. At the same time, he happened to read a book about the Donner Party disaster of 1846, when a party of immigrants, snowbound in the Sierra Nevada, were reduced to eating their own moccasins and the corpses of their dead comrades. Chaplin, proving his belief that tragedy and ridicule are never far apart, transforms these tales of privation and horror into a comedy, in which his familiar tramp figure becomes a gold prospector, joining the mass of brave optimists to face all the hazards of cold, starvation, solitude, and the occasional incursion of a grizzly bear. The idea took shape much quicker than was usual for Chaplin. This was the only one of his great silent comedies for which he began to shoot with the story fully worked out. Only 2 months after the premiere of his previous film, A Woman of Paris, he had sent a scenario for copyright and set his studio to work on building sets. Chaplin generally strove to separate his work from his private life, but in this case the two became inextricably and painfully mixed. Searching for a new leading lady, he rediscovered Lilita McMurray, whom he had employed as a pretty 12-year-old in The Kid. Still not yet 16, Lilita was put under contract and renamed Lita Gray. Chaplin quickly embarked on a clandestine affair with her, and when the film was 6 months into shooting, Lita discovered she was pregnant. Chaplin found himself forced into a marriage which brought misery to both parties, though it produced 2 sons, Charles Jr. and Sidney. The production was shut down for 3 months. Lita was replaced on the film by an enchanting new leading lady, Georgia Hale. With this unforeseen interruption and the distractions of the Chaplin's domestic tribulations, the production dragged on for almost a year and a half. It was in every respect the most elaborate undertaking of Chaplin's whole career. For 2 weeks the unit shot on location at Truckee in the snow country of the Sierra Nevada. Here Chaplin faithfully recreated the historic image of the prospectors struggling up the Chilkoot Pass. 600 extras, many drawn from the vagrants and derelicts of Sacramento, were brought by train to clamber up the 2,300-foot pass dug through the mountain snow. For the main shooting, the unit returned to the Hollywood studio, where a remarkably convincing miniature mountain range was created out of timber, 250,000 feet it was reported, chicken wire, burlap, plaster, salt and flour. The spectacle of this Alaskan snowscape, improbably glistening under the baking Californian summer sun, drew crowds of sightseers. In addition, the studio technicians devised exquisite models to produce the special effects which Chaplin demanded, like the miner's hut which is blown by the tempest to teeter on the edge of a precipice, for one of the cinema's most sustained sequences of comic suspense. Often it's quite impossible to detect the shift from model to full-size set. The Gold Rush abounds with now-classic comedy scenes. When Charlie and his partner Big Jim, played by Max Swain, are snowbound and ravenous, Charlie cooks his boot with all the airs of a gourmet chef. In the eyes of the delirious Big Jim, he is transformed into a chicken, a triumph both for the cameramen, who did the elaborate trick work entirely in the camera, and for Chaplin, who magically becomes a bird. For one shot, another actor took a turn in the chicken costume, but it was unusable. No one else had Chaplin's gift for metamorphosis. The lone prospector's dream of hosting a New Year dinner for the beautiful dancehall girl provides the opportunity for another famous Chaplin set piece, the Dance of the Rolls. The gag had been seen in films before, but Chaplin gives unique personality to the dancing legs created out of forks and rolls. When the film was first shown, audiences were so thrilled by this scene that some theatres were obliged to stop the film, roll it back, and perform an encore. The Gold Rush was the first of his silent films which Chaplin revived with the addition of sound for new audiences. In 1942, 17 years after the film's first release, he composed an orchestral score and replaced the intertitles with a commentary which he spoke himself. Among the scenes he trimmed from the film was the lingering final embrace with Georgia, with whom he'd maintained a long and often romantic off-screen friendship. Perhaps some private and personal feelings caused him to replace the kiss with a more chaste shot of the couple walking off, simply holding hands. Today, The Gold Rush appears as one of Chaplin's most perfectly accomplished films. Though he himself was inclined to be changeable in his affections for his own work, to the end of his life he would frequently declare that of all his films, this was the one by which he would most wish to be remembered.
Y tus tráilers, visita mi canal.
Somewhere in that nowhere was another lone prospector.
The gold rush is not merely a thing of the past. The poor man's dream of making a fortune, immortalized in Chaplin's films, continue to inspire directors like Idrissa Ouedraogo to this day. Just a few years ago, he dealt with the theme in a film about gold diggers in his own country, Burkina Faso, and the character of the tramp still haunts his childlike imagination.
Mes premiers souvenirs de Charlot, ça remonte il y a très longtemps. Je devais avoir 6 ans au CP1. Parce qu'il faut se rappeler qu'à l'époque, dans le village où j'ai grandi et où je tourne un film en ce moment, où j'ai tourné la quasi-totalité de mes films, il y avait l'église catholique. Il projetait beaucoup de films, mais avec un but d'évangéliser les enfants, les jeunes. Et donc les films les plus attrayants, bien sûr, les films de Charlot.
On est en train de le faire, vite ça.
After when you destroy, I want to be discreet.
Silence!
It's 3rd November 2002, and the Idrissa Ouedraogo is filming his 8th feature film in the countryside around his native town, Wayigoya. Meanwhile, the children of Wayigoya are, in their turn, discovering the gold rush. It's the first time in their lives they've seen the character of the tramp, and his effect is miraculous.
Ce qu'on retenait le plus, c'était tous les moments de rire, sa démarche un peu bizarre, unique, j'allais dire, et aussi le fait que c'est un petit bout d'homme, c'était comme nous, c'est un adulte, mais c'était en même temps un enfant, et je pense que c'est ça qui a créé un lien d'affectivité entre moi et Charlie Chaplin et puis tous les jeunes de mon âge. Parce que dans Charlot, c'est les sentiments qui sont le plus importants et les sentiments sont universels. On ne voit pas de couleur de peau, on ne voit pas de couleur on voit pas un blanc, on voit des émotions.
The idea for this scene came to Chaplin after he read a tragic article about the 19th century convoy of immigrants. These unfortunate people, led by one George Donner, found themselves cut off by snow in the Sierra Nevada, level with Lake Tahoe. The only way they could survive was by eating their dogs, their cowhides, and their moccasins, before starting on the flesh of their dead companions. Turning this tragic cannibalistic event into comedy, Chaplin used it as the basis for the famous chicken scene in The Gold Rush. In the original version, Big Jim hallucinated a life-size bird that metamorphosed into the tramp when he tried to grab it.
What's the matter, said the little fellow. I thought you were a chicken.
While shooting, Chaplin had a better idea. Rather than having Big Jim hallucinate, the tramp himself would actually become a chicken.
Ah, well, build up the fire, said Big Jim.
Tus trailers, visita mi canal.
What's the matter with you, said the little fellow. Come, my pretty bird, said Big Jim. Don't be childish. Hey, quit it, don't be foolish, it's me. You, said Jim. I'm sorry, I must be crazy. Huh, you're telling me, said the little fellow. There now, you go inside and I'll take the gun in case you lose it.
Le plus commun des cinéastes aurait imaginé un coq grandeur nature, c'est-à-dire de ce qu'on voit tout le temps. Et là, il est allé plus loin, c'est quelque chose de gigantesque. Et c'est proportionnel au degré de son envie de manger, de la faim qui le tenait. Et qu'importe que ce soit, alors à ce moment, un coq, un animal ou Charlie, il a tellement faim qu'il veut le manger.
At first, a film technician wore the bird costume, but Chaplin wasn't satisfied with his performance, and the crossfadings with the little man weren't working. So, to make the match perfectly, he donned the bird costume himself. Suddenly, the chicken was walking like the tramp. Big Jim's hunger and confusion were so great that, in an elaborate scene, he pursued Chaplin into the snow, gun in hand. Although Chaplin did film these shots, only those which were filmed in the hut and its immediate vicinity were kept in the final edit. A man who can laugh at himself delivers all men from the burden of their vanity, wrote Elie Faure, the poet, about Chaplin in 1922. Just think, he makes people laugh about hunger, even hunger. Having gone hungry in his childhood, Chaplin found in hunger a rich source of jokes right from the start of his career. In The Gold Rush, it is the growing pain of hunger never displayed before with such accomplishment, in direct opposition with the film's subject of the glory of wealth, that provides the comical thread. The idea for the Gold Rush came into being one Sunday in October 1923, when Chaplin was visiting his friends Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford.
You know, he found that story at Pick Fair. Yes, I gave Douglas one of these stereoscopic cards, you know. They were three-dimensional. Douglas had a whole library of them, and he stayed the whole afternoon. And that is where, what was called the Klondike, what was it called?
Oh, the Gold Rush.
The Gold Rush.
In the great gold rush, Alaska was the hope and dream of wayworn men, the ruthless siren of the far north, beckoning thousands to her icy bosom, beckoning thousands to her unknown regions. The Chilkoot Pass was the great barrier to the goldfields. Over this pass, men faced untold misery and hardship. Many lost their lives, some fell exhausted the wayside, others lost courage and turned back, but the brave went on.
Chaplin had started filming in the studio in February 1924, but he decided to film the opening scenes on location in the Sierra Nevada, near to the very place where George Donner's immigrants had had their tragic adventure. Like that early convoy, Chaplin came up against the mountain with its snow, wind, and icy cold. For the scene, they dug a 700-meter-long path at an altitude of 3,300 meters along a natural formation known as the Sugar Bowl. On 10th April 1924, 600 people, mostly tramps recruited in Sacramento, the nearest town, climbed up the famous snowy pass in front of Chaplin's cameras. The group also comprised members of the film crew who weren't busy, and the film's leading actress, Lita Grey.
A lot of snow, very deep snow, and we all had
Visita
very heavy fur coats and 2 or 3 thicknesses of clothing, and it was cold. And there again, many retakes. We thought we'd never get off that location.
3 years earlier, in The Kid, Lita Grey had played an angel in the unforgettable dream scene. She returned to her normal life, but the experience had left its mark.
I went back to school after I finished The Kid contract. And I was bragging to Myrna about having worked for Charlie, what a marvelous man he was, and so forth and so on. And she was intrigued. She wanted to meet him. So I said, well, we'd go to the studio and watch him work one day, which we did. And as soon as Charlie came out to greet us, he said, you're just in time, because I've been testing brunettes for a part in the Gold Rush, this film that I'm going to make. So he did another film test on me and decided that I would be right for the part.
It very quickly became clear that the continuous blizzards, freezing cold, and impossibility of getting even snow cover were hampering the shooting. It was decided to return to the studio and shoot the rest of the Sierra scenes there. So Chaplin moved his whole team back to Los Angeles. On 2nd May 1924, everyone was back at the studio, ready to start filming again. During the 2 months that followed, while Chaplin was reworking the script and the gags, the set designers were ingeniously recreating Alaska in the heat of the California summer. Miles of planks and hundreds of yards of barbed wire were used for this. 200 tons of plaster and 100 barrels of flour were needed to recreate the ice and snow. The hardware bill shows that hundreds of pickaxes and spades, tons of steel and cement, 400 kilos of nails, and 3,000 bolts were used in the construction of the set. Then Lita Grey got pregnant by her director. Chaplin married her and had to find a new actress for his heroine. She was Georgia Hale.
He could make anyone do a scene. He did it, he felt it. He really did it himself. He acted himself. He acted the scene out for you, including every flicker of the eye. He just felt it, gave it to you, and instilled it into you so that you just had to give a terrific performance.
Visita mi canal.
I didn't want him to kiss me.
How about giving me a
The
little
scene called for him to take me in his arms and give me a good big kiss. Charlie kept retaking it because he always retook everything to get the right reaction from me. And finally, I was in a rage, and I really slapped that fellow awfully hard across the face. And that was the take that Charlie took and really wanted, was that violent temper that came out when he kissed me once too often.
Pardon me, said the reporter, but who's the lady? Buzz, buzz, buzz. Oh, you don't say. Well, congratulations. Say, this will make a great story, and with a happy ending. And so it was. A happy ending.
That was the happy ending of the second version of the film, remade by Chaplin in 1942. But in the silent version that was released in 1925, the scene went further, and the happy ending was even more explicit.
So when he had a chance to kiss me, then the kiss lasted way longer than it should have lasted. It went on, and then finally, and then he kept retaking it and retaking it. Then I was quite sure that his feeling for me was more than just a director for a leading lady. And of course, I knew what my feeling was all my life.
Filming in the studio allowed Chaplin to master the weather effects that were needed in the story, without having to suffer them in reality, as they had in the Sierra Nevada. As it happens, in the film, the natural elements play most often to the tramp's advantage.
Get out. Get out. Go on. Go on. Get out. Get out. And the wind also was giving Big Jim his troubles.
Quand on regarde ça, on se dit comment il a pu faire ça. Puis l'idée première, tu te dis, un gros ventilo à la porte. Mais on voit que ses habits ne font pas du vent quand on regarde, c'est bien. Donc c'est pas un effet comme ça qu'il a utilisé. Il a dû sûrement utiliser, ici on aurait utilisé peut-être du savon sur les semelles pour pouvoir mieux patiner. Mais en fait, et puis c'est sur quelque chose d'assez légèrement incliné, dont on ne sent pas trop bien l'inclinaison qui permet aussi cet effet.
Go on. Get out.
c'est dynamique, on y croit, on est dedans. Et puis c'est fabuleux parce que on pense que le mec il est très très fort et il va le foutre dehors. Et puis il y a des événements extérieurs, une intempérie qui vient régler tout le problème, c'est-à-dire qui empêche Charlot de sortir. Et ça fait que c'est le bonhomme qui est gros, qui est fort, qui lui-même est éjecté de sa propre maison.
Tus trailers, visita mi canal.
Something must be missing underneath, said the little fellow. I'll go outside and see what it is.
In this sequence, Chaplin was working with a scaled-down model. He had to make sure that he passed from the miniature to the full-sized hut without any disruption to the rhythm. The perfect synchronicity of the movements and the skill of the technicians make the transitions almost imperceptible.
En regardant ces films, on voit quelle ingéniosité, quel talent ils ont, avec quoi, il n'y a pas de trucage moderne comme les ordinateurs, mais ils arrivaient à faire des choses extraordinairement fantastiques. Ça veut dire qu'il y avait de la réflexion réelle sur le cinéma et que aujourd'hui le cinéma devient un peu une addition de moyens financiers, d'effets spéciaux très chers et que c'est vrai, ce n'est plus à la portée des pauvres, en guillemets, et les pauvres devraient, en guillemets, se dire que ce cinéma que nous avons tant aimé et qui existe encore peut être des références extraordinaires et peut dire que le cinéma est à la portée aujourd'hui de tout le monde.
Completed on 15th May 1925, after 15 months of work, the film was edited in 9 weeks and presented shortly afterwards for its world premiere at the Grauman Egyptian Theatre in Los Angeles. It was a triumph. For the talkie version of the film that came out 17 years later, Chaplin made few changes to the editing. He composed music to accompany the action and wrote dialogue and a commentary for which he used his own voice. All over the world, the film was an event. In London, his hometown, the BBC played a 10-minute section in which all that could be heard was the laughter of the audience watching it. At the Berlin premiere in 1925, the audience applauded the roll scene so loudly that it had to be shown again. The truly ultimate scene, an instance of pure ingenuity, owed nothing whatsoever to big movie budgets. It was replayed by Chaplin the following year to the camera of his friend Ralph Barton. But Chaplin was not the first to bring it to the screen. The idea, which Fatty Arbuckle borrowed and filmed in 1917, came when he and Chaplin were working together at Mack Sennett's. But in The Gold Rush, the scene is far more than a joke or an idea, for it is executed with such dexterity that it achieves a poetry that is still unequaled.
And there was Georgia caressing him with her smiles and tender glances. And the girls called for a speech. But he was too happy to speak. All that mattered was Georgia was there. Georgia. So he muttered and stuttered and finally said, "I can't make a speech, but I'll do a dance." And a dance he did with the rolls.
Once again, please.